Hi, my name's Celeste. I'm singing the role of Télaïre in Castor Pollux.
I am Margaret Plummer. I'm performing the role of Phœbé in Castor Pollux.
The French Baroque repertoire has been a big challenge for me. I'm not very familiar with it. It's actually been so helpful to work with people like Erin Helyard, who are so knowledgeable, so interested, so obsessed by this kind of repertoire. They've been so helpful to me to point out all of these different ornamentations, which I had not a clue about, actually. I've had to learn them all from scratch. There's a lot of documentation, Baroque documentation, about these kinds of twiddles and bits. We call them twiddles because I don't know the exact name for every little ornament that I do.
Yes, as assistant conductor, I come early to the rehearsal process, and often the conductor will come a little later, and that happened this time. Anthony came in the week after, and so one of my duties, responsibilities is to listen to all the soloists and the chorus and prepare them and get them on the same page. With a work like Rameau's Castor Pollux, there's a lot to talk about style. So, for example, in Australia, we don't do so much French Baroque all the time, although we're doing way more than we used to in the last 7 years, since our last production of French music. So part of my job is to talk about ornaments, to tell all the specific taxonomy of French ornaments and explain what they are, so everyone's on the same page when Anthony arrives.
This is my first major Baroque role. I was actually terrified of turning up to the first music call and looking like a Baroque twit, because I didn't feel like the style was in my bones yet. But so I coached a lot with Erin Helyard before rehearsal started, and thankfully he was amazing, and we really worked on all of the ornamentation and things, and I got a much better feel for the music, and I think it's working pretty well.
I think with the role of Télaïre, to start with, the text is very poetic, to say the least. It can be interpreted in a multitude of different ways, but I think actually the most interesting way is to find sort of her inner turmoil, her inner conflict. So I think with this character I've decided to include her past relationships with both Pollux and Castor as sort of the beginning of her character, and these two men are what drive her to do what she does. Such as making deals with Phœbé to go into the underworld, trying to get Pollux to rescue his brother. These are sort of motivations that I've been thinking about quite a lot.
As far as the vocal lines for Phœbé, my understanding of them has changed dramatically since we came into the rehearsal room. When I was learning the role, I had her feeling quite sorry for herself and feeling really despondent that Castor didn't love her. And through the rehearsal process, we've established that she is powerful and mean and despises Télaïre for having taken Castor from her. So there's a lot more venom in everything she says, and she seethes through a lot of her lines.
You could interpret Télaïre as being a selfish character quite easily. She is very much motivated by the love of two men. She is driven by her desires, and they're quite impulsive. You could even say they're quite youthful, but she's very indecisive, which makes her very human. She is a woman who is very much thinking on her feet all of the time, thinking of the best ways to rescue her Castor from death, the best way of manipulating other characters within the opera to try and restore her love.
In getting the role ready, as far as placing a character onto the text, I go through every sentence and try to figure out how that character is feeling in reference to that particular phrase. And it's much easier with her being vicious and conniving now, because I've known lots of vicious and conniving women, and it's very easy to place that on to each of everything she says. It's a much easier process. And it's easier to go to that extreme of being vicious than it is to represent real, effective sorrow on stage.
This kind of repertoire is something that I've only just started looking at. Rameau is actually the earliest music that I've ever really done. I've done early Mozart, I've done a bit of Gluck, but Rameau is a totally different kettle of fish. And it's funny even if anyone was to pick up my score and actually just have a look at the scribbles that I've got on they would see that every bar, every note is highly detailed with ornaments, with, well, for me, I mean, a big obstacle for me was actually the French language as well, because I'm not a native speaker, and it's been not an obstacle, but it's been a challenge for me. And I'd like to think that my voice suits this repertoire very well, but I think that will be up to the audience to decide.